Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the intricacies of the housing crisis in Utah and our solutions to it. To catch everyone up on what the housing crisis even is, we need to let you all know how this affects you.
This video will solely focus on the housing crisis in Utah and solutions to fix this problem. As part of our video, we will focus on solving the housing crisis in a timely manner.
If you've been watching the news or heard your parents talking about housing prices, you've probably heard that property prices are skyrocketing, and this affects you because you are going out into the world soon and you're going to need a place to live. Therefore, let's catch you up on the facts about the housing market you're about to step into.
Some factors in our issue include the increasing number of people who are searching for a home in a scarce housing market. Building costs and land prices are also growing, further increasing the bar to entry into home ownership and living space.
There are so many different people involved in the housing market, including previous family homeowners looking to move, renters wanting to switch home ownership, married couples, young single adults, low-income families wanting to improve their living conditions, the homeless, and so many more.
Our research specifically focuses on those who are classified as living in poverty and their housing conditions and opportunities.
Well, you may be asking now, what defines someone as living in poverty?
According to James A. Wood from the University of Utah, poverty means that your housing takes up a large portion of your income, becoming what he calls a severe housing cost burden. He quotes the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, which shows that 41% of renters in Salt Lake County must spend more than 30% of their income on housing and utilities, and nearly 19% of all renters spend more than 50%.
In addition, 27,500 households who are spending more than 50% of their income on housing and utilities face what is known as a severe housing cost burden.
To give you a further understanding of this issue, the University of Utah David Eccles School of Business gathered statistics and created this chart.
Looking at the top row and starting on the left, we can see that those making less than 30% of what the annual median income is for Salt Lake County, which is the equivalent of 21,103 people, are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. That makes up 14.5% of renters in Salt Lake County.
The David Eccles School of Business also did a statistical analysis of apartment vacancy rates. This shows how many apartments are available on the Utah market for prospective renters looking for a place to live.
The chart starts in 2010, showing that for each type of rentable apartment, there were somewhere between 5 to 7% of them available on the market. As we follow the chart down to 2021, you see the percent of available apartments for rent drop below 2% for each type.
Because there are so few apartments available to rent, the available ones are shooting up in price. They rise higher than what those low income and poverty can afford. This keeps people on the streets with no housing and causes those who cannot afford an increase in rent to be evicted. The housing market has just a bigger problem with unavailability as well.
You may now be wondering, why are people not renting selling their property? A group of economists who review economic policies and decisions for countries around the world explain this American problem that Utah and Salt Lake County specifically are experiencing on the podcast called Economics Explained.
They start by saying that people are honestly scared to rent and sell their property. This contradicts the usual market behavior, as they explain. Conventional economic wisdom dictates that as the price of a good rises higher and higher, more and more market participants will be willing to sell that good to satiate the demand at the higher price.
This is not the only problem facing the market in Salt Lake County and Utah as a whole. The podcast Economic Explains goes on and tells that the problem here is the housing is a necessity. As a human necessity, higher house prices don't always compel people to sell their homes because they are just going to have to buy back into the same market, compete in one of the most broken rental markets in history, or live on the streets. None of these options make the people off any better.
The economist finishes their explanation by saying, what's more is that this fear compounds on itself. Not many people are selling to the people who do sell to buy a new home in the same market, which runs the risk of not being able to find a suitable home quickly enough and then having the market appreciate rapidly, meaning they needed to purchase a home that is worse or put themselves back into more debt to get back into a similar property. This all means that people would rather hold off on selling, and the cycle repeats itself.
The study conducted by the Chem C. Gardner Policy Institute also concluded that a housing bubble crash in Utah seems unlikely because of the unparalleled demand for housing in Utah. Instead, the researchers found that the housing market will most likely plateau as supply meets demand as more houses or homes are being built, but this could take many years. This issue can be seen as urgent because the COVID pandemic has damaged supply chains and made it hard to source materials to build a home. The study found that from these shortages, the price of homes has gone up and stated that by the end of 2020, the median price reached $380,000, pricing out approximately 48.5% of Utah households.
Rental rates have also significantly increased to a 10.1% annual increase. Mortgage rates have seen historic lows, and this promotes the borrowing of cheap money. This allows more institutional investors and people in general to take out more money to buy housing because they can get the money at a lower rate, which makes the overall mortgage cheaper.
This problem in the housing and rental market is only furthered by the wage gap, meaning wages are not and cannot increase as fast as prices are. Business is all about making money, and if a business has to increase their wages to pay their employees more, they can only regain the money they lost by doing that, by increasing the cost of their goods or services, and soon those goods and services become just as unaffordable as they were before the wages were raised.
The stakeholders in this situation are fairly inclusive. Almost everyone lives in a house, and housing affects almost everybody. Some of the stakeholders in this issue affects more specifically are renters, house buyers, and neighbors of rental properties.
The reason why neighbors of rental properties might be affected is the rentals can be homeowners feel less secure, with new people moving in and out frequently.
According to the Washington Post, if you have too many rental properties in a neighborhood of single-family homes, it can cause property prices to stagnate or even drop. That's because tenants don't always maintain homes to the level that owners who live on the property. When homes get run down, the whole neighborhood suffers.
So we can see a clear reason why people in the single-family homes might be opposed to having rentals next to them. While property prices may stagnate and drop for single-family homes that are surrounded by rentals, we have to consider the need for housing as a human need as more people become homeless due to the rising price of rent. Overall, fewer homeless people should be better than having a few bad rental properties around your home.
Another stakeholder to consider is the city governments who are in charge of the land in Salt Lake County and in Utah. In many cities of Salt Lake County and Utah, land is becoming more scarce. Our city of Riverton is a great example of this.
The Riverton City Council reports that their job to determine what can be built on certain parcels of land is difficult because of the city needs to be balanced. Neighborhoods need to stay by other neighborhoods, businesses by businesses, schools by schools, and parks and hospitals in key locations. This is important because neighborhoods are best to be built on roads where there is no major traffic. It is better to use parcels of land by major roads for businesses because the roads can carry large amounts of people to where there are fewer pedestrians.
Riverton City Council also expresses that resources are another important matter. High-density housing cannot be built in cities that don't have enough power, water, or sewer to serve that large of a population. From this information, we can see that even if there is land available, it cannot always be used to build housing in a city.
As one city's land fills up and cannot provide more housing, it forces developers to expand out to other less populated cities, which builds up those communities and makes them stakeholders in this situation too. The citizens of less populated cities can be frustrated by development expanding into their city if they like the secluded small town feel. Their voices play a role in where housing can be built in Salt Lake County and Utah as a whole as well.
We would like to propose a legislative action that would make it so that any dwelling can be divided into rentals. This would be similar to California's Senate Bill 9. From the bill's website, it is described as Senate Bill 9, the California Housing Opportunity and More Efficiency Act. Streamlines the process for a homeowner to create a duplex or subdivide an existing lot. This would get rid of zoning restrictions and requirements and make it much easier to rent out housing. Currently, you have to be in a specific zoning area to rent out housing. This would provide immediate results in terms of the amount of housing available to renters.
The bill also prevents institutional buyers that are only interested in the housing as a commodity investment instead of a human need. The bill prevents this by making the owner also live on the same property. He will divide it up into new housing units. This requirement makes it so that locals are the only ones that can take advantage of this bill and make more housing.
The bill also addresses overcrowding of property by limiting the amount of house formed to 4 units in total. This limitation eases concerns that this bill would allow a really ugly duplex with lots of divided space to make as many homes as possible. There are also concerns that this bill would ruin the look of local cities. However, it has been shown that across California, there are many examples of duplexes that fit right into the neighborhoods.
Homeowners must also meet local requirements to build a duplex, so there is a standard of living for all renters. The bill also prevents historic and landmark districts from being affected by this bill. According to the bill's website, it excludes the provisions of the bill being used in very high fire hazard severity zones, prime agricultural land, hazardous waste sites, earthquake zones, floodplains that do not have adequate mitigation, and others.
This bill will also remove some power of institutional investors within the housing market because the rentals become more locally owned. In addition, this bill protects existing renters by only dividing property that has not had a tenant in the past 3 years. According to the bill, a recent study shows that the additional housing options provided by SB 9 actually decreases the likelihood of a single-family home being torn down and replaced by a larger single-family home. Additionally, nearly 97% of all single-family homes would be retained under SB 9. This bill is one way to help solve the state's housing production crisis. SB 9 provides more pathways to home ownership and expands access to the Utah dream.
Overall, our consensus as a group is that this will lower the cost of housing, as higher supply will lower demand, therefore lowering the overall cost of housing, so that more people could have a path to housing in the future and become homeowners, which would allow them to build equity in their finances. In the future, housing should become cheaper as the high demand and prices eventually return to normal levels. We know this will happen because the housing market goes through regular cycles throughout history.
Although most of our research came from local sources from Salt Lake County, we can see that our solution will be applicable to all of Utah because we can see that the trend of increasing home prices is happening all across the state.
From our research, the status of the Utah housing market is chaotic. Our solution aims to solve these issues to make the future better looking for our posterity.
For this solution to go through, it would mean a future of community growth and prosperity. This legislation needs to be passed at the state level for it to benefit all Utahns. Please help push for this idea and proposal to be implemented by
contacting your local representative to voice your opinion that you would support a similar bill to SB 9 in Utah.